السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا وسيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. I'm not a scholar or one of these big sheikhs. Today I'll be just giving a small talk, a lecture. I will not be giving a sermon. It's just an appetizer for you guys to get ready until the big sheikhs speak, inshallah. My topic today is, as you guys see in the screens, the Reformation of Islam, and if it's allowed or if it's disallowed, and what the scholars, the sheikhs have said about it and what they have written about it. First of all, before we get into the topic, we want to say, why is this topic relevant? Why is it important that we speak about the Reformation or the modernization of Islam today? The main reason that it is important is that there's a lot of hoopla or a lot of loud noises coming from the Western countries today that is espousing or saying change Islam, reform Islam, there's something wrong with Islam. So that is why it is relevant today to speak about the Reformation of Islam. And who is behind it? The people that are behind it is a movement invented by the West, mainly, in order to neuter Islam and make it more docile. If we get into the history a little bit about the Reformation of Islam, is not something new. It is something that has existed the day that Allah sent down the religion of Islam on Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. You guys all know why Surah Qul Ya Ayyuhal Kafirun was sent down. The tribe of Quraysh wanted to reform Islam. They said to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and let worship with us for 1 year, and we will worship with you for 1 year. Right after Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam died, and Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu anhu became the first of the Khulafa al-Rashidin, there was a campaign by the Arab tribes to reform Islam. They said, oh yeah, we like Islam. Islam is a great religion. It has a lot of bounties. It has a lot of good stuff. But there's this one nagging thing called zakat that we want to take out of Islam. And you know how that ended, that Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu did not allow that. So it's not something new. The Reformation of Islam, I wanted to get into your heads, is something that has existed for a long time, for over 1400 years. Now we need to ask ourselves a question. All this information begs a question. And this question is, why? Why do these people want to reform Islam? There can be two reasons. First, since they have reformed their own religions and have their religion only in name, but they do not practice their religions, they want to do the same to other religions. It's a part of the human trait to be envious and to be jealous, for there to be hatred in the human heart. So, since they changed their religions and they really do not have religions anymore, it is part of human nature to want to change other religions. And then there's a second possibility of why they want to reform Islam, that they feel threatened by it. They feel threatened by Islam. And we need to ask ourselves the question right here, why would they feel threatened by Islam? There can be A or B. A is that Islam is very strong. Islam has military strength today. And they shake when they see the Islamic banners coming down the road. Or it can be that Islam is so good, so perfect, that when it is shown to the common man, he or she would flock to it. So I ask you guys a rhetorical question. Is Islam strong today, or is Islam good? It's obvious that Islam has no military strength today, that Islam is not dominant today, but is dominated. So it is obvious that they feel threatened by Islam because of the goodness and the perfectness of Islam. And this is shown and backed up by the fact that Islam is the fastest growing religion in the world. It is the fastest growing religion in Europe. It is the fastest growing religion in Asia. It is the fastest growing religion in the United States of America. Alright, so the non-Muslims and some Muslims have said Islam needs reform. So we need to look into the mirror like men and ask ourselves, does Islam need reform? We were asked a question, so we need to, before we answer the question, we need to ask ourselves the question. Go back to our sources, go back to the Quran, go back to the Hadith, go back to the facts, and ask ourselves, does Islam need reform? But before we do that, we need to define reform. What do they mean by reform? Reform what? By reform, the West and the people that are clamoring for Islam to change mainly mean Islam to become more moderate. They say that Islam is far to the right, and that it needs to come to the middle. So that's what they mean by reform. So we have defined what reform means, is to become more moderate. So does Islam need to be moderated? The answer is no. We can look into our sources, the Quran, for example, and use logic and see that it's a false question. It has no basis. Allah says in the Quran, وَكَذَلِكَ جَعَلْنَاكُمْ أُمَّةً وَسَطًا. Allah says this in the Quran. And what does this mean? This means that Allah said the Islamic Ummah is an Ummah right in the middle. They're right in the middle. They're not to the right, they're not to the left, they're right in the middle. So Allah answered their question before we answered their question. Alright, so now let's look at examples if Islam is moderate or not. That's the Quran. Maybe they don't believe in the Quran. Let's look at facts, things that they cannot argue with. For example, in Islam, when somebody commits a crime, the punishment is right in the middle. It's not to the far left and it's not to the far right. And by this I mean that there's no anarchy. If somebody commits a crime, they're locked up first. They're not allowed to do whatever they want to. And there's no long-term confinement in Islam. There's no prison. There's no life in prison. If somebody kills another person, if somebody rapes another person, there is no long-term confinement. There's no such thing as being in jail forever, and there's no such thing as being free. Islam is right in the middle. Allah sent down a lot of things in the Quran that we can't get into right now called had. If you commit a crime and it is proven that you committed that crime, the had will be put upon you. That shows us that Islam is in the middle when it comes to in punishments and confinement. Let's look at women. A lot of the times, and when the people of the West or the people that are clamoring for change, when they want to show that Islam is not a moderate religion, they jump to the women. They say, "Oh, women are abused in Islam." So let's look at the women. Islam is the only religion that does not force women to work and that does not deny women to work. If a woman wants to work, go right on ahead. No one is going to force her to work and to stay home. If a woman wants to stay home and take it easy, enjoy the shade, nobody's going to force her to work. Islam is the only religion that gave the woman a choice. There are some societies in India or China where women are not allowed to work. Some villages in China, not all of China, and they're not allowed to work. They're told to stay home. And then there are some societies in the West where women have to work. If you don't work, you don't eat. So Islam is right in the middle. Let's look at punishments right now. In Islam, if you commit zina and if you're a woman or if you're a man, the had is equal. If you're rich or if you're poor, the had or the punishment is equal. If you're black or you're white, the punishment is equal. If you're a pure blood Quraysh and descended from Prophet Muhammad ﷺ's tribe, and if you're another tribe, the punishment is equal. This shows us that Islam is a moderate religion, using examples from everyday life. Now let's look at countries, Muslim countries, and people that have reformed. I'm not going to pick on anybody, but let's look at Muslim countries that have reformed and see where they are right now. If the reform has helped them, or if the reform has hurt them. Today we'll use the country of Turkey as an example. We can use a lot of countries as an example, but the reason that we're going to use Turkey is that it's a very good example. There's a lot of data out there about how Turkey has changed over the past century after they have reformed. So we will use Turkey as the main example in our lecture today. Turkey has chosen to reform more than about 50 years ago. And they have chosen the Kemalist ideology invented by the man named Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, that was their president and leader more than half a century ago, over the original Islam. They have reformed Islam. They still have Islam. There's a lot of good Turkish people out there that are very strict fundamentalist Muslims, but as a country, they have chosen the reformed Kemalist ideology over the original Islam that we know. Since they have separated religion from state, let's look at their position today. It is true, first, whenever you're gonna say something about a country or a person, you have to always go with the facts. So we're gonna look at the facts. It is true that Turkey has the 15th largest economy in the world, and has the biggest economy among the Muslim nations. And it is forecasted in the coming century that Turkey will move up to the 7th position considering in large economies of the world. It is without any doubt that it has the most modern technology and most modern infrastructure of any Muslim country. Turkey is built very well. The roads are built well, the buildings, the downtown, everything is built well. So it has a very modern infrastructure and very modern technology among the Muslim nations. It also has a strong military. This is made evident and proven by the fact that the Turkish army is the second largest army in NATO after the United States Army. All of NATO, of Europe, and the United States, the armies in NATO, Europe and Turkey has the second largest army of any of these countries, only after the US. But this does not prove these worldly gains came after the Reformation of Islam. And is it possible that if you don't reform Islam, you can still get all this? To prove this, we have to look back into history. During the golden age of Islam, when the empires of the Muslim countries extended from Spain and Andalus all the way to India, without reforming Islam, without changing Islam, without modernizing Islam, Islam dominated in the economy, the sciences, the earthly philosophies, and the military strength. Without reform during Harun al-Rashid's period, Islam was not reformed and Islam dominated in all of these categories that Turkey is dominating in today without reforming. So that shows us that the reform and the worldly gains do not go hand in hand. They do have the worldly gains, but it's not because of reform. Now let's look at something that Turkey does not have today, but the Islamic empires of old had in their day. Since reforming, Turkey has changed a lot socially, very much. And since we did some research at Al-Taqwa and you did some research, we have found some startling changes to the social structure of Turkey. For example, since Turkey has reformed, men raping women has increased by 500%. By 500%. And we need to ask ourselves, why has rape, one of the most despicable acts of humankind, increased over 500%? It's simple. Allah created the man and the woman, and He has sent down from the seventh heaven the manual to guide them to the right path. He has told women to be modest, to wear hijab, and men to lower their eyes. But in Turkey, they have changed many of those rules. For example, in public places, women cannot wear hijab. If you can't wear hijab in Turkey, you can't be modest. So that is why women not being dressed well, women not being modest, men looking at them, that's what causes the rate to increase by 500% over 50 years. That's a startling number. 500% over 50 years. A little bit more than 50 years, but you get the point. 500%. Let's look at a couple of other facts. since reforming Islam by Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, divorce in Turkey has increased exponentially. So let's ask ourselves a question again. Why does the divorce increase exponentially when Islam is reformed? It's the same answer as before. Allah created the man, Allah created the woman. He alone knows best how they're supposed to work with each other, listen to each other when they're at home. Once you change the Quran and you say that the woman doesn't need to listen to her husband, and they're equal now and when they're in the house, they're equal now, and everybody's the master, obviously divorce is going to increase. Alright, one more fact. There's a lot of facts out there, but we can't go into all those facts today, right here. So one more fact. Since reforming Islam, the prison population has risen alarmingly in Turkey. Before there was a small prison population. Now there's a very, very high prison population. And why is this? The reason this is because people are not scared of prison. Once people know that if they commit a crime, they'll be taken to prison, they'll be given food, they'll be given housing that some of them maybe didn't have, some of them maybe were homeless, they will start committing crimes regularly, at a regular basis. So that is why Allah sent down had. If you commit this crime, this is the punishment. People are, it's obvious, it's been known since the beginning of humankind that people are afraid of capital punishment more than they are afraid of long-term confinement. What does this cause? There's another problem that this causes. Once you have a high prison population, it increases the tax burden on the community. If a person kills somebody and they're killed, if a person commits rape and they're killed, there's no taxes to be paid. You only have to pay the executioner. There's no food that has to be paid. There's no land that has to be bought. There's no prison population. There's no prisons that have to be made. So this say, if there's no prisons, if Islam does not believe in forever confinement or long-term confinement, it reduces the burden, the tax burden that the community or the country feels. So let's move on. Let's summarize a little bit. This clearly proves that the reforming of Islam might bring about increase in worldly gains. It might bring about better technology, a stronger military, and so on and so forth. But it will bring about a decline in morals. It will bring about a decline in social cohesiveness. What does Allah say about reforming Islam? Since I said that Turkey has reformed Islam, many other people have reformed Islam. The main people that are clamoring for change of Islam on the news channels are Muslim people. So what does Allah say about these Muslim people that are saying, oh, does reform Islam? Allah says, Prophet Muhammad ﷺ told us that Allah said, whomever changes one ayah in the Quran, one ayah, changes the whole Quran and they're not a Muslim. If you say, oh, today we have to accept interest. We live in this country, we have to accept interest. And women, hijab is the old thing. Let's just change the ayah of the hijab. If somebody says, let's just change one ayah, for example, the ayah of the hijab, or the ayah of the had, what a person that commits zina and is punished with, they're not a Muslim anymore. They have left Islam. Allah will show that these people, or in these countries, their mistakes in this world and the hereafter. We know what's going to happen in the hereafter. What is going to happen in this world? What I just said is going to happen in this world. Allah showed us in this world, through what happened in Turkey the last 50 years, the rate rising by 500%, the divorce increasing exponentially, the prison population and thus the taxes and the tax burden increasing rapidly. Allah showed us in this world what happens to people that reform His religion. And the problems in the hereafter is also awaiting them. One last thing. There's a lot of ayahs in the Quran that we don't understand, that seem foreign to us, that seem weird to us. Sometimes, you don't understand why this ayah is in the Quran. And sometimes you question yourself, oh, why is this ayah in the Quran? Should we change this ayah? And there's a simple solution for that. The human being's brain is very, very tiny compared to that of Allah's. Allah created us. Allah created this world. He knows what's best for us. If you do not understand the meaning or the reason behind the ayah, swallow it. Take it. Do not question it. Inshallah, maybe in the future, once you grow older, once you gain wisdom, you understand the ayah. And even if you don't, in the hereafter, inshallah, you'll understand it. But do not question or try to reform Allah's ayahs in the Quran or Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam's hadith. وبالله التوفيق والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.